What's up, guys? Asian here again with another video today, and I figured I'd go over something that's happened over this past weekend that I feel like warrants some discussion. Those of you guys who have are part of the Healer Discord, or perhaps some of the other class rep Discords, probably have already seen what I want to talk about. And some of you guys might not, but I feel like based on just kind of what's happened this past weekend with what happened in that Healer Discord for the class reps, I do think that this warrants a little bit of discussion now. In addition, the class rep program has been out now for quite a while, so I think now is a good time to kind of assess what the program has done, where it can improve, and kind of what my opinions are of the program based on what has come out of it so far. So why don't we start first with what happened this weekend, because this kind of ties into my feelings about the class rep program as a whole. So what happened this weekend was there was some frustration going on with the in the Healer Discord. Basically, Taser, who is a class rep, has basically for lack of a better way to describe it, has pretty much been ignoring a lot of feedback that endgame healers have been giving her. And understandably, these healers are getting very frustrated with her attitude, basically ignoring a lot of endgame healers' advice and feedback, and basically not including them at all in the documents that she shares on the Healer Discord. And so basically there was a lot of frustration going on. A couple of words were said, were passed along from both sides of the party, none of which, some of which were like respectfully disagreeing, and others were basically pretty mean, pretty toxic. And so Taser just ended up banning a couple of endgame PvEers, healers from the Healer class rep Discord, some of which I think might have deserved the ban because of what they've said, but others just for being associated with the people who got banned. And so those groups of people then decided to make their own Healer Discord, and Taser ended up basically throwing another kind of temper tantrum, so to speak, basically saying that they'd get in trouble for impersonating and copyright infringement and all that stuff. Actually, I have the actual message that Taser has on the screen right now, which is pretty immature of Taser to react this way, even if the people who she banned were in the wrong and were banned for proper reasons. This just kind of shows the kind of immaturity that has come out of Taser. So that's kind of the background of what's happened over the weekend, and so that kind of ties into the whole frustration with the class rep program. So this is a feeling that is pretty much been boiling underneath for quite a while now, and it's basically this idea that the class reps don't do a very good job at representing endgame PvE in terms of what we want out of the game and what we think is appropriate in terms of balance, in terms of the direction for the game, and things like that. I have on the screen right now just a list of the class reps, and I also have the ones circled, the ones that I recognize as being very well versed in PvE, whether that's tanking, healing, or DPSing. And you can see here we have only 5 out of our 15 class reps are endgame PvEers, and some of them have been doing a very good job with collecting feedback. Leofa is a classic example of what I believe the class rep program should embody and what it should be, which is basically you have an experienced endgame player, PvE or PvP, who manages feedback, some sort of feedback intake system. In this case, let's say it's Discord, and because they have the experience necessary to basically divide the feedback into what is good feedback, what is bad feedback, they basically take the good feedback and channel that through to the devs at ZOS. That is what I feel like the class rep program should ideally be. Of course, this isn't what has happened. There are plenty of reps on that page who either do not have a complete understanding of PvE or PvP mechanics, or who I believe have been acting fairly immaturely, for example, Taser. So The Clash Rep program, to me, has kind of failed in multiple ways. The first way being that the devs don't really seem to be listening to what sort of feedback that Clash Reps are giving, returning. At least not all the feedback, or at least not the very important points of feedback that's at the very least endgame PvE community believes should be had. And based on the kind of fiasco that has come with the shield changes, clearly they haven't been doing a very good job with PvP feedback either. And so that kind of ties me back into not just Taser, but also Joy Division and maybe some other Clash Reps that have been collecting feedback. I'll use Leofa as the good example and Taser as the bad example, just because those two Clash Reps are the ones I'm most familiar with in terms of how they return feedback. So Leofa pretty much does what I described earlier when I said this is what I want the Clash Rep system to be. He basically takes the feedback, acknowledges who said that feedback, and basically kind of categorizes them, so to speak, into what is good feedback and what is bad feedback. So he basically gives everybody's opinions a certain weight. So somebody who has just started to learn how to tank, perhaps, maybe has tanked a couple of vet base game dungeons, their opinion, while it might be valid or it might be heard, generally speaking, is going to be have a lower weight, so to speak, than somebody who has tanked all the vet content in the game, hard mode trials, everything like that, just purely because the person who has tanked all the endgame trials has more experience in PvE content. So that's just sort of how it ends up being. Now, on the other side, you have Taser, who basically has been ignoring endgame PvE healer feedback. And as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I know, I should say, she hasn't cleared all the hard mode trials in the game. Some of the people she's banned, like Heals to Feels, they have cleared all the content in the game, all the PvE content in the game. So naturally, they are the people who I would trust with their feedback. I wouldn't trust that their feedback is legitimate and is coming from a place of expertise and a place of experience. Taser, on the other hand, while she does have some vet trial experience, generally speaking, does not seem to have I don't want to say necessarily have a bad grasp of the mechanics, but the way that she has approached feedback is in our eyes, sort of biased. There's not much feedback for Templars, not much feedback for Wardens. There's a lot of feedback for Sorks and Nightblades, two classes of which she tries to play very, very heavily and tries to promote, basically, on the forums. So in that regard, yes, she's giving feedback back to the devs, and she's collecting all sorts of feedback that might be relevant or not relevant to healing, to PvE, to PvP. And basically, she's been ignoring endgame PvE feedback. That's not really the way that a Clash Rep should be performing. And of course, this is not necessarily limited to Taser. I'm just using her because she is the most recent example that I have and the one that is freshest on my mind. But there are other Clash Reps that, generally speaking, do not have, in my opinion, either a good grasp of the mechanics or are refusing to take feedback from more experienced players. And generally speaking, that's not really something that you would want to have in a Clash Rep. Taser just took it a step further by actually banning people from the Clash Rep Discord. So people who want to learn how to heal in endgame content no longer have that resource anymore. In fact, I have on the screen right now, this is somebody who was banned from the healer Discord, actually, giving what her thoughts were on the ban and her thoughts of how Taser should be acting as a Clash Rep. And it basically boils down to, you're supposed to be gathering feedback from everybody in the game, and yet you decide to ban all the endgame healers. So how can you say you're representing the community as a whole when you are completely censoring a part of the community just because they disagree with your thoughts, critique your builds, or just downright correct things, misinformation that you might be spreading? So that's kind of how I feel the Clash Rep program is standing right now. It's at the point where I don't have a lot of faith remaining in the Clash Rep system. Here's another example of why I don't really have that much faith in the Clash Rep system. So here we're talking about power creep in the game and kind of where it comes from. And Joy Division mentions that it's because of CP. We're getting more CP each game. And while he's not necessarily incorrect, Code, who is a very good endgame PvEer, you can see in his forum Form Signature, he is the officer of Night Fighters, one of the best PvE guilds in PCNA. Code's basically saying, well, you're not necessarily incorrect, but it's not because of CP, because of the way CP is front-loaded now due to changes in Morrowind. So power creep, sure, CP might be responsible for some of it, but it's not responsible for nearly as much as you think it is. And so I would trust Code. And this is not the first time that Joy Division has kind of said that CP is the cause of power creep. And so, that just kind of makes me very wary about necessarily bringing feedback to some of the class reps. Some of the other class reps, Alcast, Fear Turbo, Leofa, those guys I trust to communicate the feedback because they have an understanding of the game. They have an understanding of the mechanics and how the game basically works from a mathematical standpoint, from a theoretical standpoint. But then you have class reps like Joy Division, like Taser, who their statements and their actions reflect to me that they don't have a good understanding of the game, or they're not willing to learn from the people who have the experience in the game itself. So that's kind of where I stand on the class rep system. Now that it's been out for a while and we've kind of seen the results, I do appreciate the openness and the transparency that Gina has been posting the class rep meeting notes and things like that, and the class reps are fairly accessible if you ever want to talk and give feedback. But overall, I don't think they've really accomplished anything, and there's not really an easy solution that I can propose that would fix this. The first thing that I would probably say is, Zos, you have to kind of listen to the endgame players, the players who have an understanding of your game, who play your game and beat it. Essentially, listen to what we have to say, because we understand what's going on behind the game mechanics. We kind of have an understanding behind the synergy, behind the skills, and things like that. I'm not saying just for PvE, I'm also talking for PvP. Listen to those endgame PvPers who have a better understanding of how a certain change might impact the way Cyrodiil works, or impact the PvP meta. A lot of people have been saying you basically took the hammer to a problem instead of fine-tuning it with a chisel. There is a great thread on the official forums that I'll link in the description below, basically kind of going over, Zos is basically taking a sledgehammer to perfect their masterpiece rather than chiseling out the imperfections. And that's something that Zos is very guilty of, and that's something that we as players kind of understand. The fact that you can't just take a sledgehammer and blanket nerf movement speed, for example, in PvP. That just you're not really fixing the problem at all that we've stated is a problem. So that would be the first step. Actually listen to the endgame players. The second step would be to have class reps be from that community. Sure, everybody's opinions deserve to be heard. Our peers, the solo players, people who don't do endgame content. But generally speaking, when you balance the game around the endgame content, it generally works out to balance itself out for the people in the mid-game content and the early game content as well, just because things trickle down, so to speak. So that would be two steps that I would probably take into consideration when it comes to how you can best improve the class rep program. So first, actually listen to the feedback from the players, and not just any player. It should be from players who have the experience, who can show that they have the experience. And the second is just revamp the reps entirely and just remove some of the reps who are giving maybe not the best feedback, or maybe aren't doing their role very well, and replace them with players who do have that understanding, that do have the ability to kind of communicate these pain points to the developers. I would hate to see ESO start to die, and I know a lot of people, especially with this Murkmire changes, it's been called the Nerfmire. I would hate to see the game start to die because of the way Zos has been taking the hammer to the problem, so to speak, to continue on with this analogy. So I do hope that they kind of re-examine the class rep program and kind of re-examine how they're taking feedback and how they are rebalancing this game in the future updates. I would love to see ESO continue to thrive and continue to grow as a community, but the way that the direction that I see the game going, I just am not very optimistic. In at least in the endgame PvE sense. I don't PvP enough to kind of know the health of PvP, but from what I've gathered, it doesn't seem like it's in a very good state either. So hopefully Zos will learn from the mistakes that have been made during the Murkmire patch, and kind of improve the game in other ways now. So that is pretty much it for this video. Hope you guys found this informative. Please let me know down in the comments section below what you guys think of the Class Rep program. It's been out for quite a while. We've have enough data now, data points to kind of see how the Class Rep program works, whether it is working, and whether it's working for the betterment of the game or not. So I would like to know what your guys' opinions are. As you can always reach out to the class reps themselves as well. I know the OFA is always willing to kind of listen to any feedback that's given, as long as it's respectful, of course. So please, if you have feedback, feel free to reach out to the class reps as well. They're probably the best source, the most direct line to the actual developers at ZOS. So that's it for this video. Hope you guys found this informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.